Have you ever spent hours studying English, memorized hundreds of words, learned grammar rules, and still felt like your English didn't sound natural?
Maybe people understand you, but something still feels off. Maybe your sentences sound correct, but they don't sound like the way native speakers actually talk.
If you've ever felt that way, you're definitely not alone.
I think that's one of the biggest frustrations English learners face. You know the language, you've studied for years, but when you finally start speaking, it sounds like you're reading from a textbook instead of having a real conversation.
Exactly. And here's the good news. This usually doesn't happen because your English is bad. It happens because you've been taught to focus on being correct before being natural.
Today's conversation is all about that. We're going to talk about why English sometimes sounds robotic, what causes it, and what you can do to sound more relaxed, confident, and natural in everyday conversations.
And don't worry, you don't need to copy someone's accent perfectly or use difficult vocabulary. Small changes can make a huge difference. All right, Leo, let's jump into today's conversation.
Anna, I have a question for you.
Go ahead.
Why do you think so many English learners feel like they sound robotic?
Honestly, I think there are several reasons, but the biggest one is that many learners try to remember complete sentences instead of learning how to communicate ideas.
That's interesting.
Think about it. Imagine someone asks, "How was your weekend?" Instead of answering naturally, many learners immediately start searching their memory. What was the sentence my teacher showed me? Where is that grammar structure? Am I using the right tense? By the time they answer, the conversation has already slowed down.
That happens to me when I'm learning another language, too. Sometimes I know exactly what I want to say, but I spend so much time trying to build the perfect sentence that I stop sounding like a person and start sounding like, well, a computer.
That's a great way to describe it. Real conversations aren't perfect. People hesitate, people change their minds, people start one sentence and finish it another way. That's completely normal.
Exactly. Native speakers don't usually speak in perfectly organized paragraphs. Sometimes they stop in the middle of a sentence. Sometimes they say things like, well, actually, or let me think. Those little moments make speech sound human.
That's a really important point. Many learners believe they should remove every hesitation because they think hesitation means weakness. Actually, natural hesitation often makes you sound more comfortable.
I agree. Of course, if every sentence has a 10-second pause, that's different. But saying things like, well, or let's see is perfectly normal.
Absolutely. And here's a useful expression. When we say someone is thinking on their feet, we mean they're creating ideas while they're speaking, instead of reading from a script or memorizing answers. That's a wonderful expression because that's exactly what real conversations require.
Thinking on your feet. I like that expression. It's much closer to real communication.
Exactly. If this phrase is new to you, try saying it with us. Thinking on your feet.
Thinking on your feet. I can definitely imagine using that one. There's another mistake I notice all the time.
Which one?
Learners often answer simple questions with answers that are much longer than necessary.
That's true. Can you give an example?
Sure, imagine someone asks, what do you usually do after work? A natural answer might be, I usually go to the gym, then I head home and make dinner. Simple. But sometimes learners feel they need to impress people.
So they say something like, after finishing my professional activities during the working day, I generally proceed to my residence where I prepare my evening meal.
That sounds like a business report.
Exactly. Nothing is technically wrong with that sentence, but nobody talks like that in a casual conversation.
That's something many learners don't realize. Good English isn't complicated English. Often the simplest answer sounds the most natural.
I completely agree. Sometimes learners think longer sentences automatically sound more advanced, but native speakers often prefer shorter, clearer sentences.
Definitely. And there's another reason people sound robotic. They avoid contractions.
Oh, that's a big one. Instead of saying, I am happy, they say, I am happy. Instead of, we're going, they say, we are going, every single time.
Exactly. Now, there are situations where you wouldn't use contractions, for example, in very formal speeches or certain kinds of writing. But in everyday conversation, we use contractions constantly.
Almost without thinking.
Right. Imagine someone says, "I cannot believe it." That isn't wrong, but most Americans would probably say, "I can't believe it." It feels lighter, it flows more naturally.
The rhythm changes too.
Exactly. English has a very specific rhythm, and contractions are a big part of that rhythm.
Speaking of rhythm, I think that's something learners don't pay enough attention to.
I couldn't agree more. Many people focus only on pronunciation. They ask, "Am I saying this word correctly?" But rhythm is just as important.
Sometimes even more important. You can pronounce every individual word correctly and still sound unnatural because every word receives exactly the same amount of stress.
That's a perfect observation. English isn't spoken like a machine. Some words are stronger, others become softer, some almost disappear.
Exactly. Listen to these two versions. Version 1, I want to go to the store. Every word has the same weight. Now listen to this. I wanna go to the store. The sentence flows. Some words connect together, some become shorter.
That's much closer to how people actually speak.
Of course, learners don't need to force themselves to say wanna all the time, but understanding connected speech helps you both speak better and understand native speakers more easily.
That's true. Connected speech is everywhere. Words naturally join together, sounds change, letters disappear, and that's perfectly normal.
Actually, can I ask you something?
Of course.
You said connected speech. Could you explain what that means one more time? I think some viewers might be hearing that expression for the first time.
Absolutely. Connected speech simply means that when native speakers talk, they don't pronounce every word separately. Instead, words connect naturally. For example, "what do you" often sounds more like "what'ya," or "going to" often sounds like "gonna." It doesn't mean people are speaking incorrectly, it's simply how spoken English naturally flows.
That explanation makes a lot of sense. So, connected speech isn't about breaking grammar, it's about natural pronunciation.
Exactly. And don't worry if you can't use it perfectly right away. The first goal is recognizing it when you hear it. Later, you'll start using it naturally yourself.
There's another habit I'd like to talk about.
What's that?
Translation.
That's probably the biggest challenge of all.
Many learners don't actually speak English. They silently speak their own language first, then translate everything into English.
And that process takes time. It also creates sentences that sound unusual because you're following the structure of another language.
Exactly. You're not making grammar mistakes, you're making translation mistakes.
That's a great distinction. Those are two completely different things. A translated sentence can be grammatically correct, but still sound unnatural.
I remember talking to a learner who always said, I have 32 years.
That's a classic example. Everyone understands what they mean, but English doesn't express age that way. We say, "I'm 32."
Exactly. The learner wasn't making random mistakes, they were translating directly from their first language.
And almost everyone does this at some point. It's a normal stage of learning. The important thing is gradually learning to build ideas directly in English instead of translating every thought.
That's much easier said than done.
It certainly is, but it's also one of the biggest breakthroughs an English learner can experience, because once you stop translating every sentence, your conversations become faster, more relaxed, and much more natural.
I think that's a perfect place to pause because we've already covered several habits that can make English sound robotic without people even realizing it.
And now we're going to continue with something that surprises almost every English learner. Sometimes the biggest reason your English sounds robotic isn't your vocabulary, it isn't your grammar, it isn't even your pronunciation. It's your fear of making mistakes.
I completely agree. I've met learners with excellent English who still sounded uncomfortable because they were trying so hard not to make a single mistake. It's almost like they're editing every sentence before they say it.
Exactly. Imagine having a conversation while someone is constantly stopping you and asking, "Are you sure that's the correct verb? Did you use the right preposition? Shouldn't that adjective come first?" You wouldn't sound relaxed.
Not at all. And unfortunately, many learners become that person inside their own heads. That's a great way to describe it. Instead of listening to the conversation, they're listening to their inner critic.
I love that expression, your inner critic. That's the voice that keeps saying, don't make a mistake. People will notice your accent. They'll think your English isn't good enough.
Exactly. But here's something interesting. Native speakers make mistakes all the time. They restart sentences, they choose the wrong word, they forget names. Sometimes they even change their minds halfway through a sentence.
And nobody thinks it's strange, because conversations aren't performances, they're interactions.
That's an important difference. When learners think every conversation is like an exam, they naturally become tense. But real conversations are collaborative. The other person is trying to understand you. They're not waiting for you to fail.
That's such an important mindset. Most people aren't analyzing your grammar, they're paying attention to your message.
Exactly. If you're speaking with someone at work, at a coffee shop, or while traveling, they're usually thinking, what is this person trying to tell me? Not, I wonder if that was the correct present perfect tense.
I wish more learners believe that, because I think many people avoid speaking simply because they're afraid of sounding imperfect.
And ironically, trying to sound perfect often makes you sound less natural.
Can I tell you something that happened recently?
Of course.
I met someone who had been studying English for almost 10 years. Their grammar was excellent, their vocabulary was impressive, but every answer sounded rehearsed, almost like they had practiced it hundreds of times.
What happened?
After talking for a few minutes, I asked a question they hadn't prepared for, something very simple. I asked, what's something that made you laugh recently? They smiled, paused for almost 15 seconds, and finally said, I have not prepared for this question.
I can imagine that. It's actually a perfect example. They knew English, they simply hadn't practiced spontaneous conversation.
Exactly, and that's a skill many learners forget to develop.
Conversation is unpredictable. Nobody hands you a script before you meet someone.
Right, that's why it's so valuable to practice talking about everyday experiences instead of memorizing speeches.
For example, instead of memorizing one perfect answer to what did you do this weekend, try answering it differently every time. Maybe one day you say, I stayed home and watched movies. The next time, I visited my parents. Another day, I didn't do much, I just relaxed.
That teaches your brain to create language instead of retrieving memorized sentences.
Exactly, that's a completely different skill.
Another thing that makes English sound robotic is using the same expressions over and over again.
Oh, absolutely. Many learners find one phrase they feel comfortable with, and then they use it for everything.
For example, someone says, really? And they always answer, yes. Another person asks a question. Again, yes. Someone gives them information. Yes. Someone tells a joke. Yes.
That happens a lot. English has so many natural ways to respond. Instead of always saying yes, you could say, I see. That makes sense. Absolutely. You're right. Fair enough. I hadn't thought about that. That's interesting. Good point.
Those little changes make a conversation sound much more alive.
Exactly. And they also make you sound like you're really listening.
Listening is another topic we don't talk about enough. People often think becoming fluent only means speaking better, but becoming fluent also means becoming a better listener.
That's so true. Good conversations depend on both people. If you're only thinking about what you're going to say next, you're probably not paying attention to what the other person is saying now.
And then your answers don't always match the conversation.
Exactly. Sometimes learners prepare their next sentence so early that they completely miss the question.
I've done that before. Someone asked me one question, and I answered a completely different one because I had already planned my response.
We've all done that. That's why active listening is such an important communication skill.
Here's something else I've noticed. Some learners speak in very short sentences because they're afraid of making mistakes.
Yes, everything becomes, I'm happy, I like coffee, I work, I study.
Those sentences are correct, but conversations become much more interesting when you add one extra idea.
Exactly. Instead of saying, I like coffee, you could say, I like coffee, especially in the morning because it helps me wake up.
Or instead of, I enjoy traveling, you could say, I enjoy traveling because I love experiencing different cultures and trying local food.
Notice that those aren't difficult sentences. They're simply more personal.
And that's the key. Natural conversations aren't built around impressive vocabulary. They're built around genuine experiences.
That's one of my favorite pieces of advice. Don't try to sound smarter. Try to sound more like yourself.
I think social media sometimes creates unrealistic expectations too.
How so?
People watch short videos where someone speaks perfect English for 30 seconds, no pauses, no hesitation, no mistakes. Then, learners think, that's how I should sound.
But those videos are edited. Sometimes they're recorded several times before they're uploaded.
Exactly. Real conversations don't work like that.
Not at all. In real life, people interrupt each other. They laugh, they forget words, they ask questions, they tell stories that go in unexpected directions. That's what makes conversations enjoyable.
I actually think those little imperfections make people more relatable.
I agree. Have you ever noticed that when someone occasionally laughs at their own mistake, the conversation often becomes more comfortable?
Definitely. Instead of creating distance, it creates connection.
Exactly. People appreciate authenticity much more than perfection.
If you could give every English learner just one piece of advice, what would it be?
That's a difficult question, but I think I'd say this. Spend less time trying to sound like a textbook and more time trying to sound like yourself. Tell your own stories, share your own opinions, describe your own experiences. Your personality is far more interesting than memorized examples.
I love that. Mine would be slightly different. I'd tell learners to speak English more often in situations where nothing important is at stake.
What do you mean by that?
For example, talk to yourself while making breakfast, describe what you're doing while cooking, explain your plans for the weekend out loud. Practice speaking before you actually need English. That way, when a real conversation happens, your brain is already used to creating English naturally.
That's excellent advice. Many people think practice only happens inside a classroom, but some of the best practice happens during ordinary moments.
Exactly. You're walking the dog, you're driving to work, you're folding laundry. Those moments are perfect opportunities to practice thinking in English.
And the best part is there's no pressure. Nobody's judging you, nobody's waiting for a perfect answer. You're simply building confidence one sentence at a time.
Before we finish today's episode, I'd like everyone watching to remember one thing. Fluent speakers aren't fluent because they never make mistakes. They're fluent because they keep communicating even when mistakes happen.
That's beautifully said. Every conversation teaches you something. Every mistake gives you feedback. Every new interaction helps your English become a little more natural.
So if your English still sounds robotic today, don't get discouraged. That doesn't mean you'll always sound like that. It simply means you're still developing your natural speaking style.
Exactly. Fluency isn't about becoming someone else. It's about becoming comfortable expressing your own thoughts in another language. And that takes time, patience, and lots of real conversations.
The more you listen to natural English, the more you speak without trying to be perfect, and the more you focus on connecting with people instead of impressing them, the more natural your English will become.
We hope today's conversation gave you a different way of thinking about fluency. Remember, sounding natural isn't about using difficult words. It's about communicating comfortably, listening carefully, and allowing your personality to come through every time you speak.
Today, before we finish today's episode, I'd like everyone watching to remember one thing. Fluent speakers aren't fluent because they never make mistakes. They're fluent because they keep communicating even when mistakes happen.
If you enjoyed this podcast conversation and found it helpful, we'd really appreciate it if you gave this video a like and subscribed to the English Talk channel.
And we'd love to hear from you. Tell us in the comments, what do you think makes English sound robotic, and what's one habit you're going to change after watching this video?
Your experiences might help another English learner who's facing the same challenges.
Thank you so much for spending time with us today. Keep practicing, keep speaking, and remember that every conversation brings you one step closer to sounding more natural and more confident in English.
We'll see you in the next episode.
Take care, everyone.
Bye for now.